this is Roger. Welcome to another Every Orchid I Own thing, and this is going to be a right assortment, this one. As I've said, it's just the order I'm watering them in, and that's just how it goes. But before I start, I just wanted to show this a little bit closer now that it's opened. This is Mr. Hairy Dendrobium senile. We've now got 3 of the 4 blooms open. I believe these last reasonably well, but yeah, the depth of the green in the centre of that lip, I don't remember it being that dark, but then I haven't seen these blooms for a while. Yeah, so a nice little unexpected show. Well, this is my 3rd Orengis, and this one's separated out from the other 2 because of its light level. This is a highlight plant as opposed to the other 2, which are medium bright. But this one can often be found in full sun. Not all day, but much brighter light. It has bloomed. It had 3 spikes on it, and I promptly took it to one of the orchid societies to show it off, and it promptly got excluded from judging because it's 2 separate plants. Well, I didn't know that at the time. And then in addition to that, with the transport in the car and the dry warm atmosphere in the hall and the transport in the car bringing it home, the next day it promptly dumped all its blooms, so I won't be doing that again. But yes, it has bloomed before. It's in growth mode at the moment. It's producing some nice new leaves and some new roots, and a few of the older leaves are dropping off. At some point down the line this will bloom again. 2 nice little plants. I like that one. That's Orengis decariana. Well, this one is Dendrobium jenkinsii, which I do have, crossed with Dendrobium aggregatum, which is often referred to as Lindii now. I'm not sure whether they are separate or synonyms, but either way it's a cross. Out of my resting Dendrobiums, this is the only one that didn't bloom. It could still be a young plant. I'm not writing it off as a non-bloomer. I suspect it will bloom after its rest, you know, this coming winter. But it's pushing out a lot of new growth at the moment in all directions, and quite a lot of new root growth in there as well. So it's going to be a bigger, stronger plant by the time it goes into winter this time. So I would expect some blooms. The jenkinsii bloomed incredibly well. The difference with this is that there will be more blooms per spike because of the aggregatum in it. So it should produce similar blooms, but more blooms per spike. But let's get it to do it first before we start preempting what it's going to do. This is another one I just can't get far enough away to actually film this. This is Dendrobium chryseum, and I believe this was the reason of the big box being a big box. It was to get this thing in it. I was hoping that a lot of these growths on the older canes were going to be bloom spikes, but I'm now pretty confident they're all going to be kikis on the grounds that quite a few of them are showing signs of roots growing at the base. There's probably a dozen or more of those. When they get going and have opened some leaves and have got some roots, I'll separate those off, plant those up separately and create a new plant. That'll be to go, obviously, because with one like this I certainly don't need 2. I've just had a quick count round. There's 20 odd new growths coming up on this. They're coming out from everywhere, down from the back of the plant, all round. It's just a mass of new growths. And on top of what I've already got, boy is that going to be a big plant. I just hope that this can do its natural hanging habitat from these new growths, because if the canes can get that long and they do that upright and don't, you know, bend over and start to become pendulous, I will have serious trouble trying to accommodate this. It's got to hang down, otherwise I'm going to have real trouble trying to look after this one. But it's growing incredibly well, and at the base of a lot of those new growths we now have roots starting as well. So although these roots hydrate, they are old dry roots. Could do with some nice fresh ones, but they're starting at the base of a lot of those new growths. So massive plant, that one. This is my only Tolumnia in bloom at the moment. I've got spikes coming, but these are the only blooms out. And this is Jarak Flyer Black Magic. And a trifle worrying because there's some distortion on some of the blooms. I mean, this bloom's okay, this bloom's okay, this one's lovely. This one's not right. It's got a two-tone lip on it. It's decided to revert to a spotty pattern. Now that could just be a trait of what it's been crossed with. And then this one up here is slightly distorted. It didn't form properly. But at least 3 of the blooms are fine. They're the right shape and everything. So and lovely attractive colours. But that one's odd. There's one flower produced half of a lip one colour and half of a lip from what looks like a totally different plant. But anyway, at least it bloomed, and the plant itself is pushing on quite nicely with some nice root activity. So yeah, coming on nicely. Well, these two plants are in effect probably exactly the same thing. My one on the right there, which hasn't long finished blooming, that was written on the tag as Farmeri crossed with Griffithianum, whereas this one is a registered hybrid, Griffithianum crossed with Farmeri. Now you can have crosses the other way round and get different blooms, so that's a wait and see, but we shouldn't have to wait long. We've got 2 really good spikes on this one coming soon. So yeah, I don't know which way round it is, but one of them has white blooms with a lovely deep yellow throat to the lip, and the other one has a more pinky tinge to it. I can't remember which way round it is, but if these crosses are in reverse, maybe there'll be a touch of pink on this one. Quite honestly, if it's pure white with that golden yellow in the lip, as far as I'm concerned, they are the same plant. There's no point in having them in my notes as different. I mean, they grow the same, they look the same, and if the blooms are the same, so be it. Now these two are both a bit of a mouthful. This one did a strange thing. It started to produce a new growth that just rotted, just aborted, and then suddenly shot out of the centre of the aborted growth. And it is now pushing up quite a strong growth with some good roots around it. That one is Cattleya harrisoniana, Volcano Queen, crossed with Harrisoniana Binot. That didn't look too clever, and it's a straggly plant. The bulbs have managed to go off in all directions, and I'd like to see what the latest growth actually looks like, but at least that one's upright. Again, another mouthful. This is Cattleya Little Lemon Drops. I've got another cross with Little Lemon Drops somewhere lying around, and it's crossed with a Cattleya. Why not? Apparently the guy in the nursery said, "Can I use this one to make a hybrid?" And the guy in charge said, "Why not?" So that's what he called it, apparently. These little myths that come up around these things. Nice strong new growth here, shed load of new roots on this one, and I've just noticed there's another new growth the other side of the plant. So this is in effect got 2 nice leads on it now. I don't know how big this needs to get before it blooms, but it is quite a small Cattleya. So these 2 new growths could end up being blooming size growths. We'll have to wait and see. Well, this is Epidendrum Comet Valley Orange Star, and quite honestly I've just picked this up to water it, and probably a dozen blooms fell off the base of these pom-poms, but they're showing no signs of slowing up. I've still got masses of buds in the top. You know, so that these are just going to be in bloom for absolutely ages. Plant itself is in good nick. It has got some new growth starting at the base. It's still in its original pot from when I got it. But the media it's in doesn't look too bad at the moment, so I'm not going to disturb it while it's doing this and possibly cause a problem. I doubt if it would, but I'd rather not take the risk. I'm just going to enjoy these blooms, and once these canes are exhausted and there's no more buds to open, then they can be cut back and we can look at the new growths and a possible repot. But yeah, these are a lovely colour, absolutely gorgeous. Well, these are my 2 Prosthetia radiatas. These can look straggly and they are quite large. lovely patterned and very fragrant blooms. And both of these are about to bloom. There's a nice spike on this one, nice spike on this one, and both of them have, at the moment, a single new growth. But I'm hoping this year that they may actually shoot out farther back down the rhizome. They do that, but it seems that they only do that on established plants, you know, ones that are really going, you know, and then they seem to shoot out all over the place. Whereas these, relatively speaking, are quite young plants. This was a specimen plant from Burnham's from their orchid paradise. The pot was probably about 3 foot across, and it had like 30 odd spikes on it at the time. And looking at the way it was growing in there, you know, when it was split up, obviously some leads were taken off, you know, which takes away its the bulk behind the leads that would have supported them. So it's quite a shock to the system. But I mean, they've grown okay. They've bloomed on every new growth they've produced, and they're about to do it again. These could do with both going in one pot and being set up for the next few years without any disturbance. But anyway, we'll see what happens with those. But they're going to bloom soon. Well, this is Encyclia prismatocarpa, a non-bloomer, but I've only ever seen this type of orchid in bloom on massive plants. I've never seen a smallish plant in bloom, so I don't know whether it's actually big enough and strong enough to bloom yet. But it has got sheaths, and I've just noticed on this one we have a few little white dots here and there, so that's about to get a massive spray. This was mounted once, and it was with 2 other plants quite close together that got really bad scale infestations. And even though I thought this plant was clean, I've just spotted a couple. This is the damage they do. Once they take bites out of the leaves, especially when they're young, the bite marks grow into the leaves, and this one seems incredibly sensitive to the slightest touch from bugs, and the marks just stay. But I did... Last time I watered it, there were a few little white dots around the bottom, which if they were scale, that's the crawler stage. Well, those can only occur from an adult. So somewhere in there could have been just one adult lurking that's just decided now to push out some new versions of itself. So that's going to get a bravado, good soak, systemic, and hopefully that'll keep them off the leaves. I don't mind them so much around the base of the plant. That just gets an alcohol spray when I see them. And even though that might not deal with the adults, the systemic should. And the alcohol spray certainly kills those little crawlers. I mean, they are just so tiny. They're, you know, their death would be very sudden from evaporative effect of alcohol. So they get a spot treatment now and again, and this one was treated last time. There were quite a few little white ones around the base. I don't see, there's perhaps 1 or 2 there now, so it probably did the job, but I need to protect the leaves, so it's going to have a good spray this time. So this in effect is a community pot of Cattleya pradis spots. I had a plant that I bought that actually had 2 plants in it when I repotted it, and then I was given another one that also had 2 plants in it, so there's 4 in there I think. They haven't all taken well yet, but there are some good roots pushing out in places, and there is one very strong new growth coming up in the middle. So at least some of it's going to grow, but it hasn't long been set up like this, so it's going to take a while to establish itself. But if all those pieces grow, that should be a nice pot full eventually, you know, with new growths coming out in many places, and a nice pot full of roots eventually. So coming on. Now this was Mr. Sulky for quite a while. I got a batch of orchids from Orchids and More, and this one lost its new growth that it had. And ever since then it just sat there and sulked. It would not grow, but it is pushing out new roots now. We've got active root growth, and we have a lovely strong new growth starting, and that's Siang Yu, Red Pearl, Red Dragon. No, sorry, Red Dragonfly. It's a long name, but it's coming back into growth. It has got active roots now, so strictly speaking, looking at the size of the plant and the fact that it has bloomed before, yeah, there is no reason why that new growth shouldn't bloom. So at last we might have a red Cattleya. A bit of a wait yet, but down the line, a red cattleya hopefully. This is my Encyclia cordigera, and this has been a Mr. Sulky. When I got it, it was in bloom, and it was totally root bound. And in my wisdom at the time, which may not have been the best idea on reflection, I potted it on because I didn't want to disturb it. And so basically I put it in a larger pot with some fresh media around the outside. And some roots grew into that media. It wasn't bad. But when I decided to totally repot it and get all the old media out and whatever of that new media fell off the roots, it sulked. It basically just sat there and has done nothing for some considerable time. But Mr. Sulky is now coming back into growth. So we've got a couple there, we've got one here, there's one coming up in the middle there. So we do have new growths now, and the fact that it hasn't long been repotted, any new roots that come out can get in that media and stay there for a while, and strictly speaking there's no reason why those new growths shouldn't bloom when they mature. And I deliberately filled this one next because although it's Encyclia cordigera, its clonal name is Siang Yu. Well, we've just had a cattleya with that as part of its name. Just shows how some of these names get shared around, not necessarily even on the same type of plant. I mean, Encyclias are in the Cattleya Alliance basically, but yeah, so it's finally coming back into growth. Be a while before it blooms, but there's no reason why it shouldn't bloom on at least some of those new growths. Well, these are the two rescue Cattleyas. Yeah, what a project this has been. The plant was lost, and I took off 2 leads and potted them, and all the roots rotted off, and I was just left with a couple of canes, no sign of life and no roots. And I didn't want, because there'd been some rot in the main plant, I didn't want those canes in anything. So basically I used to give them a dunk now and again. Oh, fan time, so that'll be the end of the filming today. I dunked them every now and again, and dunked the leaves as well to try and get some hydration in, but they sat just as bare canes on a shelf for months and months, and then suddenly there was a sign of life, and since then they've been making progress, albeit very, very slow, but nonetheless they seem to be coming back. This was the new growth on this plant, weak, small, but in doing so it did produce a couple of roots, not many but a couple, and there are some little green bits showing at the base of this rhizome. They're going to be roots, I suspect. It would be wonderful if that eye could shoot out, but I don't think it will. There's no strength in these plants basically. Now, this is the other one, and the only way I could pot this was sort of sticking up in the air, and you know, I must admit it shot out from a place I wasn't expecting, but nonetheless it did. It has grown some roots. This has got a better root system than the other. The roots managed to go straight down in the pot where they're active, and there's some signs of life at the base. I've got a feeling we're going to get a new growth on this one soon. That'll be good, because it's now got a root system, so the next new growth it produces should get up to a better size, you know, and an extra leaf will do it the world of good. But very, very slow progress on these two, but at least they're not dead. Sometimes a plant goes downhill and you never know why, and this is one of those. This was a beautiful plant, mounted, Dendrobium harveyanum, stunning blooms, and virtually in continuous bloom the year before last. Last year it started to slow up and didn't do as well, and it got to the point where I thought I need to change something. The plant is not happy. If I leave it much longer how it is, it's just going to die. So I unmounted it and potted it, you know, do something different. It's currently got a couple of spikes coming on that are progressing, so taking it off the mount and potting it hasn't stalled the spikes. The only new growth it had was produced at the beginning of the winter and never progressed, it just failed. But it is starting to produce some new roots near the base now. it's going to take a while to acclimatise to being in a pot, so it's just going to go slow for a while, and I'll just have to see how it progresses, and we'll go from there. But it will bloom soon, so at least we'll see the frilly blooms again. Well, these two dendrobiums have just been moved out of the strong light, starting to show signs of light stress in places. This is Roy Tokunaga White Knight. This has bloomed. Blooms lasted ages. The two latest growths are these two, and being a typical Latoria type, it looks like it's going to bloom, and it looks like that for some time, and then one day it probably will. Although that top section there, that sort of stump that lives in the apex of these things has just split. I can see green, so I think that cane is going to bloom soon. It's got a single new growth pushing on at the moment, and there is some root activity. Nice plant. This one was bought as a plant with new growths on, and boy did they grow. I never expected this plant to be this big. And this is my only, well, my only antelope type. Definitely, there is another one that probably is as well, and this is Dendrobium black something, black antelope. There you go. It's all in the name, you know. So having produced 4 strong new growths, these two are already here at the back. These are my two, never bloomed yet, but these canes are now mature. They've produced their terminal leaf. There's no reason why this shouldn't think about blooming now, and 2 nice new canes coming on behind. Would have been nice to have got more than 2, but it seems to grow 2 at a time at the moment, so as long as it does that, I'm happy. 2 Oncidium types here. This is, or was, Oncidium Sweet Sugar. It's been moved to another classification now. I've been struggling with this for a while since it previously bloomed, and when it pushed up this new growth, it was slightly above the media, and it spent ages with no roots at all, and then it just suddenly decided to grow some. So now it's got some roots. Obviously its future lies in its next new growth, because I don't believe that one is actually going to bloom, which is a shame. I like those blooms. And this is the Hamiltonara that's been in bloom for some time recently, and that is scale. See, you turn your back. That was clean last time I looked at it. Yeah, so that now needs, and there, if you look at there where those scale are, you see that pale patch? That's permanent. Every spot where they've bitten in will now be a permanent pale patch on that leaf. Never goes away. So that needs a spray. But this, we got new roots starting at the base of this stonking new growth. So it's just a matter of having a bit of a clean up and keep that new growth growing strong. It's recently been repotted to accommodate the new growth and the subsequent new roots, irrespective of the fact that it was blooming. So that should pull on. See what I mean? You can't see the scale from above, can you? But they've damaged the cells right through the leaf. You've got to keep on top of them. Okay, I'm finding a pattern in the area now where I am. Practically everything I've watered and filmed so far has been, as near as damn it, bug free. I did find the odd mealybug here and there, but this particular area I'm watering now has scale. This is Miltonia flavescens. I think that's what it's called. Flavescens, yeah. So that's a species, Miltonia, and that only had a few at the base of a couple of bulbs, but I'm getting to the point now where a spot treatment on the potted plants is not good enough, on the grounds that I guarantee I won't get them all, yeah? And then I'm going to get looked at again for an amount of time when they come round to being watered again. And that's too long. This time of year, the environment in here, scale breed like hell. And, you know, you miss 1 or 2 and, you know, in 4 or 5 days' time you could have 200 or 300. So that's just been absolutely drowned with the Bravado. Roots and all. If I do a plant, I do it properly. Undersides, pseudo bulbs, top leaves, and as much spray on the base of the plants to get it into the roots as well. If you're going to use it, use it. If you do half the job, you're more likely to leave some behind and possibly start resistance. So although my plants don't get sprayed very often, when I spray them I do it. Now this is it's an Odontodia, Peggy Ruth Carpenter, and this was the Zygopetalum I bought, Arta Ellie, Stonehurst, was in an auction, and unfortunately it was in a group of 3, so you had to buy all 3. This was one of them. It had a new growth that has now matured. There's not a huge amount of root activity in there, but I suspect that will come with the next growth, which should be soon, quite honestly. I don't think this growth will bloom, but anyway, it's healthy looking, despite being a small plant. Now this was a gift, this Bealara Joe's Drum, and it's struggling, but it's getting there. Had the concertina leaves when I got it, dehydration, lack of roots basically, and it is now starting to produce new roots. So I'd class that as recovering, but slowly, quite slowly. It's coming on. I mean, I think it's going to make it and it will grow, but what I'm looking for is some new growths on it rather than trying to work with the 2 that I've got. But we'll see how that does. You know, I mean, this is the growing season. We do have some active root growth now, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, we definitely have a few scale lurking. This is, I've forgotten, Roscioglossum Rawdon Jester. This has been sulking for 6 to 9 months, I would say. It has got a sign of a new growth, and just at the base of that old bloom spike I saw signs of a couple of scale, so that one's just been drowned. If they get on the new growth, they'll probably take it down, so it's quite important to get at these flipping things. This is the Oncidium Twinkle Cinnamon. This is producing a lot of new growth at the moment, and even though I've just watered it and I've just sprayed the flipping thing, I sprayed this one just in case, because it's right next to, it was in between 2 plants that got sprayed. Well, the chances are there's some lurking in there somewhere, even though I couldn't see the little blighters. But that needs going in a bigger pot, so let's add it to the workload. Yeah, I thought this would be good, filming all my plants and taking a close look at them, but all I see is work. And that needs a bigger pot to go with these new growths and the associated new roots. If I don't do it now, by the time those new roots mature, they're all going to be hanging over the side of the pot, and the root base won't be big enough to support the plant anymore, so it'll start going downhill. So it needs to get some new media in round there now, you know, while it's the right time, basically. It's already got an awful lot of aerial roots on it. Well, obviously, you know, if they carry on growing and I don't stall the plant, some of those will get down in the new media. You know, a lot of them are, although they're aerial, they are pointing downwards, yeah? So now's the time to get at it, rather than leave it. It's also got a lot of algae in that pot, so it'll be a good time to clean up the root base as well and get rid of that.